I married a man who never saw me, but the one who did was quietly standing in the shadows all along, never asking for love, only giving it. When silence broke me, his presence healed me, not with promises, but with quiet, unwavering care. My name is Sophia. I was 22 when I married into a family I barely knew, carrying a heart full of hope and a suitcase packed with dreams. I believed love could grow where it was planted. I believed that if I gave enough of myself, I would be received with open arms, warm hands, and a home that welcomed me. But sometimes the heart believes things just to survive. The first time I stepped through their front door, I remember how quiet everything felt. Not peaceful, silent, the kind of silence that isn't absence of sound, but the absence of warmth. It clung to the walls like dust, thick and untouched. The house was big, beautiful even. Too beautiful, maybe. The kind of place where nothing was ever out of place. But everything felt out of reach. I stood at the threshold of what was supposed to be my new beginning, clutching the strap of my bag tighter than I should have. My smile was hesitant but genuine. I didn't expect a parade or affection right away. I knew it would take time. I told myself I just needed to settle in, adjust, breathe through the nerves, but something in the air that day told me I was not what they had hoped for. Or maybe I was never even considered at all. He led me in without much of a word. I followed, trying to match his pace, trying to shrink myself just enough to not seem too much. The walls were painted in soft neutral colors, polished and perfect. I wondered if anyone ever laughed here. The kind of laughter that echoes into the corners of a home and lives there. I couldn't hear any. No one looked up as I entered the living room. 2 women sat with tea, barely glancing my way, then returning to their cups like I was a passing shadow, not someone who just tied her life to their son, their brother, their blood. I wanted to greet them properly, but my voice dried up in my throat. All I could do was smile, and even that felt like too much. He didn't notice, or maybe he did and chose not to. He said something under his breath about where I should put my things. Then he walked away, just like that, as if I was a guest, not his wife, as if I didn't just leave my entire world behind to follow him here. I stood alone in the hallway for a long minute, long enough to wonder if I had made a mistake, long enough to realize that no one was coming to make me feel otherwise. And still, I didn't let go of hope. That was the strange part. I held it like a fragile candle in my chest, shielding it with both hands from a wind I couldn't yet name. That first night, I unpacked slowly. I placed my books on a shelf I was unsure I was allowed to use. I folded my clothes into drawers that didn't feel like mine. I stared at the empty wall across the bed and tried to imagine it holding pieces of me. Pictures, memories, light, anything but this stillness. No one knocked. No one asked how I was doing. The silence grew thicker. It started to speak to me in ways that words couldn't. It told me that I was an outsider, that I had walked into a house that had already made up its mind about me before I ever arrived. I cried that night, but quietly, into the pillow facing the wall. I didn't want to disturb the air. I didn't want anyone to think I was weak or dramatic. I just needed a moment to grieve something I couldn't name. Maybe the version of love I thought I was stepping into. Maybe the version of myself that still believed this would be enough. And then, just as I was drifting into a restless sleep, I heard a knock. A soft one, not demanding, not harsh. A pause followed, then a voice, low, gentle, almost hesitant. "You okay in there?" It wasn't him. The days that followed blurred into one another, each one colder than the last, not just in the air, but in the spaces between people. The rooms in that house echoed with silence. It was the kind of silence that doesn't need to raise its voice to be cruel. It just waits, watches, and weighs on your chest like a stone. I tried in the beginning. I really did. I smiled when I passed by the others in the hall. I offered help in the kitchen, folded blankets neatly on the couch, cleaned dishes that weren't mine, and asked questions I already knew no one would answer. Sometimes I'd get a nod, most times nothing at all. I could walk through a room and feel myself disappear, like I had no weight, no presence, no voice. Each part of the house carried a different kind of cold. The living room was stiff and tight, like it had been holding its breath for years. The dining area was worse. Meals passed with silverware clinking, but no real conversation. Just the scrape of plates, the occasional comment tossed like crumbs, and the steady avoidance of eye contact. I sat there like I was waiting for someone to see me. No one did. I started spending more time in the guest room. It wasn't even mine, not really, but it was the only place where I didn't feel like I was in the way. I'd sit by the window sometimes and stare out at nothing. Just trees, a stretch of grass, a quiet sky. I used to imagine someone walking toward the house, someone bringing warmth with them, someone who would stop at the door and smile like they'd been waiting for me all along. But that was just my heart, aching for a softness it had never been given. No one asked if I was settling in. No one wondered how I was adjusting. Days passed and still no one really spoke to me, not beyond the necessary, not beyond politeness. He was barely there, and when he was, it felt like I wasn't. I stopped asking him questions. I stopped searching his face for warmth. It wasn't there. It was a strange kind of loneliness, being surrounded by people and still feeling like I was living behind glass. I didn't know how to explain it. I just knew that something inside me had started to wither. Then one evening, I stayed later in the kitchen than usual. I was cleaning up quietly, hoping that maybe doing something useful would fill the silence. Everyone else had gone upstairs. The only light was from the small lamp by the sink. I wasn't crying, but I was close. My hands moved slowly, almost mindlessly, over the dishes. That's when I heard him enter. I looked up, startled, expecting him to pass through like everyone else always did. But he didn't. He stood near the doorway, watching for a moment, not with judgment, not with disapproval, just watching. "You shouldn't be the last one cleaning," he said gently, his voice steady and low. I didn't know what to say. I just shrugged and smiled, small and tired. He walked over without another word, rolled up his sleeves, and started drying the dishes beside me. I froze for a second. No one had done that before. No one had seen me like that before. We didn't speak much. He just worked beside me, passing the plates one by one, careful, deliberate. His presence was quiet, but I felt it more deeply than any loud gesture could have made me feel. I didn't need words right then. Just someone standing next to me without looking through me. When we finished, he looked at me and nodded. A simple, honest look, like he had seen something in me worth standing beside. That moment settled into me like warmth in cold bones. From that night on, something shifted. He didn't speak often, but he noticed. When no one else did, he noticed. When I looked tired, he'd bring tea. When I sat alone, he'd ask how my day was, even if I had nothing to say. He never pried, never pressed. He was just there. Every room still felt cold. Every hallway still echoed with the weight of everything I wasn't. But whenever he was near, I didn't feel quite as invisible. Sometimes all it takes is one heart to notice yours shivering in the dark. There was something about the way he moved through the house, quiet, steady, without needing attention, that made him easy to miss unless you were really looking. But once you noticed him, you couldn't unsee the small ways he filled the empty spaces. He didn't speak unless there was something worth saying. He didn't intrude, didn't offer advice I hadn't asked for, didn't try to fix anything. But somehow, he gave me exactly what I needed when I didn't even know I was falling apart. I remember one morning when the weight in my chest was too much to carry. I hadn't slept the night before. I'd spent hours staring at the ceiling, wondering how love could vanish without a sound, how someone could sleep beside you and still feel miles away. I didn't cry. I was past the crying. I just lay there, hollow. When the sun finally rose, I pulled myself from bed, dressed in silence, and went downstairs. He was in the kitchen. He always was early. I thought I could pass through unnoticed, just grab some water and return to the small corner of the house where I felt safe. But he turned from the counter, looked at me, and without a word, slid a chair out at the table. I hesitated, but I sat. He placed a cup of warm tea in front of me. It wasn't the kind you grab out of habit. It was the kind someone makes when they've watched long enough to know exactly what you like, how you take it when you need it. No one had ever done that for me before. It was such a small thing, but in that moment, it felt like someone had touched my heart without even reaching out. We didn't talk. I just held the cup in both hands, letting the heat work its way into my fingers. His presence didn't demand mine, and somehow that made me want to stay longer. Over the weeks, this became a pattern. I would find small signs that he had been thinking of me, without ever making it about himself. A folded blanket on the couch I'd napped on. A book I'd once mentioned sitting on the table beside my seat. Fresh fruit cut and set out in the fridge after days when I hadn't eaten much. Nothing grand, nothing loud, just gestures that said, "I see you." Even if he never said it out loud, he never asked for anything in return. Not my time, not my stories, not my gratitude. But somehow being around him made me want to give those things anyway, not out of obligation, out of comfort, out of trust. One night I was sitting outside alone. It had been a long day, one of those days where silence wasn't just in the house, but in the heart too. I couldn't find myself in anything, not in the mirror, not in the air, not in the reasons I had once believed this life would work. He came out not knowing, or maybe knowing, that I needed a reason to feel grounded. He didn't sit beside me right away. He stood for a moment, then said softly, "You don't have to become small to fit into someone else's quiet." It was the first thing he'd said to me in days. And yet, it was exactly what I didn't know I had been waiting to hear. He sat beside me after that, and we didn't say much else. He just looked up at the stars with me, as if they might offer answers we hadn't found in people. His presence didn't fill the ache inside me, but it softened it. It reminded me that not all silence is empty, that some quiet is safe. I began to feel different when he was around, like maybe I wasn't asking for too much, like maybe I hadn't failed at being lovable, like maybe, just maybe, someone saw the girl beneath the effort, the one who kept giving, hoping, trying, while growing smaller and quieter inside a life that didn't make space for her. He never asked for anything, not even my trust, but he gave me reasons to offer it anyway. Some nights were harder than others. It wasn't always the silence during the day or the looks that passed through me like I wasn't there. It was the nights that unraveled me. When the house grew darker and the world outside felt too far away, I would lie in bed and listen to nothing but the sound of my own breathing, slow, strained, barely holding on. Those were the moments that hurt the most, when everything I'd been holding in through the day pressed against my chest all at once. I didn't have anyone to talk to about it, no arms to crawl into, no voice on the other side of the room to ask how I was doing. I had made promises, believed in beginnings, and somehow found myself forgotten before I even had a chance to be remembered. There were nights I would sit at the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, wondering how long I could pretend to be okay. I wasn't angry, not in the way people expect. I was just tired, so deeply tired of being invisible. One night, after a particularly heavy dinner where every word I said floated into the air and vanished before it reached anyone's ears, I couldn't stay in that room. I needed air. I needed to get away from the stillness that clung to everything. I went downstairs barefoot, careful not to make noise. I thought I'd be alone. I hoped for it, honestly. I didn't want to explain the heaviness in my chest or the tears pressing at the back of my throat. But as I turned the corner into the living room, I saw him sitting there, quiet, a book resting closed in his lap. He looked up and met my eyes, and he didn't flinch. He didn't question why I was there. He didn't ask if I was all right. He just nodded like he had been expecting me somehow. I stood frozen for a moment, unsure if I should stay or leave, but he shifted slightly, not away from me, not toward me, just enough to make space. That small movement told me I didn't have to pretend, so I walked in and sat on the opposite end of the couch, curling my knees to my chest. Neither of us said a word. He didn't fill the room with advice or sympathy. He didn't try to fix whatever he knew was quietly breaking. He simply stayed, and that mattered more than anything else he could have done. His presence didn't demand anything from me. It allowed me to be exactly what I was, tired, aching, and unsure of myself. The clock ticked gently in the corner. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. Inside, we sat in stillness. A safe stillness, the kind that didn't press on my chest or judge the tears I let fall silently down my cheek. He didn't look at me with pity. He didn't look away either. He just looked forward, hands resting calmly on his lap, like he understood without needing to ask. That night wasn't unique in the way pain goes. I had felt that kind of emptiness before, but it was the first time I didn't feel entirely alone while feeling it. That was new, and it was because of him. There were more nights like that. Nights when I found my way downstairs, and he was already there. Sometimes reading, sometimes just sitting in silence, always steady, always present. I never told him how much it meant to me. I don't think I had the words, but I think he knew. There's a kind of love that doesn't speak loudly. It doesn't try to be seen. It doesn't push itself into spaces where it's not wanted. It just exists quietly, consistently, waiting for someone to notice that it's the only thing keeping them from falling apart. He was that kind of love. In those loneliest hours, when I didn't even know what I needed, his quiet presence reminded me I was still human, still seen, still worth sitting beside. I had always believed love would come wrapped in vows and promises, held in the arms of the one I had chosen, that it would speak through gentle touches, whispered hopes, and the comfort of knowing I belonged somewhere. I had pictured a life where love was loud enough to drown out the world and soft enough to steady every fragile part of me. But the longer I lived in that house, the more I realized that what I had hoped for didn't exist where I thought it did. I tried to find it in him. I looked in his eyes for warmth, in his hands for tenderness, in his words for shelter. But every time I reached out, I felt nothing but distance. His presence filled a room, but never reached me. I slept beside him, yet felt lonelier than when I was completely alone. I gave my best parts hoping to be seen, hoping to be met halfway, hoping to be loved back. But he had long stopped looking at me like I was something to hold on to. At first, I made excuses. Told myself he was tired, that he'd come around, that marriage took time. But excuses turn heavy when you carry them alone. After a while, I stopped waiting for him to ask how I was, stopped hoping he would turn his head when I walked in. I lowered my voice, dimmed my light, shrunk my heart down small enough to survive the silence. I stopped asking for love out loud, but my heart never stopped looking for it. And then, without asking for anything, I began to find it elsewhere. Not in a sudden, overwhelming way. It came gently, in moments so subtle I almost missed them. A chair quietly pulled out at dinner, a cup of tea placed near me, already prepared the way I liked it, a folded blanket waiting on the couch where I liked to sit. These weren't grand gestures. They were small things, quiet things, but they spoke loudly to someone like me who had spent too long unheard. He didn't ask questions. He didn't pry into my pain, but he noticed, he remembered. He saw what I tried to hide. And somehow, without stepping over boundaries, he filled the spaces that had gone cold around me. He listened even when I wasn't speaking. He responded even when I didn't ask. I didn't understand it at first. How could someone who owed me nothing offer more than the one who promised me everything? It wasn't in what he did. It was in how he made me feel, safe, respected, seen. We never talked about it. There were no confessions, no declarations. Just an unspoken understanding that settled between us. And though I told myself not to read into it, my heart did. It's hard not to lean into kindness when you've been starving for it. One afternoon, I had the house to myself. I was rearranging the books in the study, trying to distract myself from the ache I didn't have a name for. As I moved one of the old wooden chairs, a photo fell out from behind a stack of forgotten albums. It was a candid picture me, sitting on the porch one evening, the light soft behind me. I didn't know it had been taken. I didn't know anyone had noticed I was even there. I held that photo in my hand for a long time, something in me breaking and healing all at once. That moment, frozen in stillness, told me more than words ever could. Someone had seen me. Someone had thought enough of that quiet moment to keep it. I never asked who took it. I didn't need to. From that day on, the way I looked at him changed. Not because I wanted something from him, but because I realized he had already given me what I had searched so long for in someone else, without even trying. I found gentleness where I expected nothing. I found care in a heart that had no obligation to hold mine, and I found warmth in eyes that never turned away. What I had begged for in one place, I received freely in another. There's a certain kind of pain that comes not from a single moment, but from the slow unraveling of everything you once believed in. I didn't see it happening at first. I thought I was building a life, creating something strong, something lasting. I had chosen this world, this home, this love. I had poured my heart into it, thinking that was enough, that if I gave all of me, I'd be met with the same in return. But over time, I started to notice how quiet it had become. Not peaceful quiet, lonely quiet, the kind of silence that echoes through hallways no matter how many footsteps pass through, the kind that wraps around you even when you're in a room full of people. I would speak, and my words would vanish into the air like smoke. I would reach and find nothing reaching back. And when things began to fall apart, when the cracks in our life became too wide to ignore, no one stood beside me. I tried to hold it together. I smiled when I was supposed to. I made excuses for why things felt heavy. I convinced myself that this was just a season, that things would get better. But behind closed doors, I was breaking. Not all at once, just piece by piece, quietly. And no one noticed, or maybe they did, and chose not to care. That was the part that hurt the most. Not the coldness of the one I loved, but the way everyone around us followed his lead, the way they mirrored his distance. the way their eyes glanced over me like I was no longer someone worth knowing. It was as if I'd become invisible the moment I stopped pretending everything was perfect. I remember the day everything finally fell apart. It was over something small. At least, that's how it started. A misstep, a misunderstanding, but it was just enough for everything underneath to come to the surface. Harsh words were said. Blame was passed around like it had always been waiting to land on me. No one asked what I was going through. No one asked if I was okay. They just decided I wasn't who they thought I should be, and that was enough for them to let go. I sat there, surrounded by people I once thought were family, and felt more alone than I ever had before. I didn't cry, not there. I just nodded, held myself together, and told them I understood. Even when I didn't, and in that moment, when it felt like every door I had walked through with hope was now closing behind me, I felt a presence beside me. He didn't say anything. He didn't make a scene. He just stepped closer and placed a gentle hand on the back of my shoulder. Steady, grounding, warm. It was the smallest gesture, and yet it felt like everything. He didn't leave the room when I did. He didn't hesitate. He didn't need to know every detail to decide where he stood. While others looked away, he looked straight at me. While others sat in silence, his silence meant something different. It meant he was still there, still on my side, without conditions, without questions. He followed me outside after everything, like he didn't want me to walk out alone. We stood together for a long time on the porch, not saying a word. I think he knew there were no words that could fix what had just happened, but his presence did more for me than any apology ever could. I didn't ask him to choose me. I didn't expect anyone to, but he did, quietly, without making it about himself. He just stayed. In the days that followed, when things continued to be cold and sharp, he never changed. If anything, he was even more consistent. A soft voice when mine was trembling. A steady hand when I couldn't hold my own weight. He never tried to explain away what others had done. He just made sure I knew I wasn't alone. When the world I had chosen turned its back on me, he didn't, and he didn't need to say anything to prove it. He was simply there, and that was enough. Thank you for walking through my story with me. It wasn't always easy to share these moments. Moments I once hid in silence, wrapped in heartbreak and quiet tears. I thought love would come from the one I gave everything to. But sometimes the heart finds its home in the most unexpected places. In the gentle kindness of someone who simply stays when everyone else walks away. This story wasn't about grand gestures. It was about the soft, unseen love that holds you together when everything else is falling apart. The kind that never demands, never shouts, but proves itself in presence, in patience, in small acts that echo louder than words. If you've ever felt invisible, unheard, or alone in a room full of people, know this, you are not the only one. Sometimes the love that changes everything doesn't come in the form we imagined. It comes quietly, faithfully, and without expectation. And sometimes that's the love that saves us. Thank you for listening. Until next time, take care of your heart.